Good afternoon and welcome to today's UK Column Live with me, Mike Robinson and Brian Gerrish as usual. It is Tuesday, the 4th of September, and today we're mainly talking about the reshuffle.
Well, a big reshuffle, really.
Yes. First of all, before we start that, I'd just like to apologise for the technical problems yesterday. But let's just get on with this. We're starting with The Guardian, I believe.
Well, yeah, we've just taken an article from The Guardian, which is pointing out that obviously David Cameron at the moment, I was going to say, is carrying out his Cabinet Office reshuffle, but of course Cameron will only be doing what he's being told about behind the scenes. And what we are really starting to see now is the emergence of the beast, which is really the political force behind the Conservative Party. And having mentioned that term, I think probably we should introduce the first man in the scene. There's a lot of talk at the moment on BBC and mainstream media about this gentleman, Mr. Kenneth Clarke. And the inference at the moment is that Kenneth Clarke has been moved away from justice. And oh dear, he's a man that really hasn't got a job now. He's minister without portfolio. But
well, what amazed me was, a lot of the papers seemed to be almost making fun of him for losing his job, and he was saying, well, at my age, I'm pretty lucky to have any job in the cabinet, and really they're downplaying the role that he's going to be playing, and I think that's very, very interesting.
Well, it's very, very interesting, and my opinion is it's a smokescreen, because Ken Clarke is not somebody who's on the wane. This is a man who is actually being repositioned so that he can drive home big society. Yesterday, if you didn't watch it, you can see it now on the UK Column website, but do have a look at UK Column Live from yesterday, when we were specifically talking about big society and how big society was being used to introduce revolution. That's not my term, that's the term now being used in government and Westminster documents. And we revealed yesterday that Mr. Ken Clarke is fully part of the core group whose task it is to introduce revolution into UK. And if any of you are wondering what that term actually means, it means revolution in the full sense of the words, utter chaos, violence, breakdown of UK society. These people may call themselves Tories, they may call themselves Liberal Democrats, or they could call themselves Labour, but ultimately they are working to a common purpose, which is essentially anti-British, and that term means anybody who is presently peacefully living in UK. These people have got a plan up their sleeves.
It's not just anti-British, of course, it's anti-nation state as a whole, so they are working to destroy nations right around the world.
Yeah. Well, we can have a little look at how the media is manipulated to sort of cover up what this guy is up to. I've got a quote which we'll bring up on screen from Mary Riddle, who's a columnist and political interviewer with the Daily Telegraph. Here's part of her column. And the headline there, Ken Clarke will be a bigger loss than the Tories think. And it's very interesting. This is a lady who focuses usually on the Parliamentary Labour Party, but she's now switched across to commenting on Ken Clarke. So let's have a look at what she's saying is going on. We just bring up a quote on screen. Alas, poor Ken, his departure from the Ministry of Justice will delight many in his party. No more soft-touch justice, no more burbling on about human rights. The firm smack of government can be resumed, and Europe can have a poke in the eye. Or so some colleagues will hope. Justice has been done, and the Conservative Party will be the better for it. Well, of course, in that the quote, there's a mixture of topics really, because we're saying no more soft justice, so the inference is that something much harder and tougher is coming along. The firm smack of government, well, the UK Column and other alternative media sources have been talking more and more about how the fact that justice in this country simply does not exist, in the corruption of the courts, And obviously that is now going to be cemented into place with fewer courts with juries. So I think we can be sure that the policies that Ken Clarke has brought in, which is to align courts with the European system, will continue, as will the policy of fewer courts with juries.
As will the secret court agenda, because him leaving his post will not change that agenda at all.
No, it's a cross-party agenda that we're going to see continue to run. So the key thing here is that already the media is sort of playing it down. Poor Ken has lost his job. He doesn't really know what he's going to do. And in a way, maybe we should feel sympathy for him, or that's probably what the drive is. But if we just have a look at what the BBC says about Mr. Clarke, they're getting a bit more specific. Mr. Clarke is being given a new role as Minister without portfolio in the Cabinet Office, where he will act as a government-wise head, offering advice to the Prime Minister. I apologise for the spelling mistake in Minister. Prime Minister on issues including economic strategy. So we have one columnist describing him more or less as a bumbling idiot, and we now have him being described as a wise man who's going to advise Cameron on a whole range of issues, including economic strategy.
Of course, the definition of advisor may not be, it's not gentle advice he's going to be given. It's you will do this. That's my reading of it.
Well, I wonder whether you might have been a little bit biased following on from the Cabbage Patch column, where, of course, it is always Ken who is cracking his whip to direct Cameron as to what to do.
And indeed, he has a new whip to crack.
Right.
If you noticed, as part of the reshuffle, there was a new whip to crack. So,
Well, the whole part of that column is of course, that David Cameron is not the man who is actually leading the government. He is simply the puppet head of state at the moment, or of Westminster, beg your pardon. And behind the scenes, we have people like Ken Clarke, who are the real people dictating policy. So really, where we've got Mr. Clarke now still in power, tremendous power, but we're not even to be told what he's really doing. The Minister without portfolio seems to be a very big smokescreen. So what is this man? I mean, if we have a look into his background a bit, this is probably the core of it, a diagram that was taken out of the UK column, where we started to focus on the people in government who were connected directly with the Bilderberger group. For those of you who have not come across the Bilderbergers, please research them. But here we have a group which emerged out of the so-called residue of the Nazi Party just post-Second World War. And these people have been running annual meetings, secret meetings, where they have been deciding what world government policy should be.
Well, you say secret, but of course it's not secret that they're taking place. It's only the contents that are secret. And this diagram shows the British attendees over the last 3 years. Now, if we zoom in, we'll see that Ken Clarke, the red circle is last year's conference. Ken Clarke is only being shown as attending that one conference. But of course, he has attended many other conferences and in fact, held Tony Blair's hand the first time he went. And they travelled together and they stayed together in the same hotel and I'm sure they had lots of fun together while they were there. But anyway, the point is that Clarke is on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group, along with Marcus Agius, who's sitting beside him there on that diagram, and has been absolutely a key part of the Bilderberg Group for many years.
Yeah. So we've got a senior member of the British government who is talking policy, he's talking economic policy, he's talking world government matters. As you say, the meetings themselves are not secret, but we're not seeing minutes, we're not seeing the public informed as to what's going on. So we asked Mr. Ken Clarke what he did in those meetings and what plans he's got for Britain that the British public are not being told. But I think it's interesting that we've also can show here in close proximity Marcus Agius, who was the man who was being paid £47,000 for 28 days' work a year to advise the BBC on policy.
That's him with the letter C below him, by the way.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this is extremely interesting that we've got a connection directly from Ken Clarke to the BBC. They're linked in via the Bilderberg Group. And of course, in the background, we've got Chris Patten, arch Tory, who is also embedded into the depths of the BBC Trust. So if you look at what the Tory party are up to at the moment, we've got the big society coming along. We are seeing a hardening up of government line. We're seeing common policy across all three parties. We're seeing control of the courts. We're seeing increasing control of the media, which of course Leveson is pushing extremely hard at the moment, so much so that the editor of The Independent has been prepared to alert the public to the draconian proposals that Leveson is got up his sleeve. What we're actually looking at is the emergence of a fully fledged dictatorship in UK, except this is a dictatorship which is run on joint lines between a communitarian Marxist background, but it is intimately tied in with a corporate and global corporate power, which is actually fascism. Yeah. So I think the correct term would be a dog's breakfast of politics, but very dangerous nonetheless. So I hope the more viewers will become interested in the Bilderberg organisation, and will also start to focus on exactly who Ken Clarke is and what he's up to. I think we can link him with a bit more by calling up another arch Tory and a man who seems to have immense power at the moment, and that's Francis Maude, who of course is the man who's buried straight into the Cabinet Office and the man who has actually been dealing with all matters to do with leadership and future leaders. We thought this slide would be of interest to viewers today because this was Francis Maude starting to talk about transparency, and we can see the date there, the 31st of May, and Mr. Maude is waxing lyrical about the need for government transparency in the Cabinet Office and the highest levels of the civil servant, and he was boasting that the salaries of the highest earning civil servants was being made public there. But if we actually take a little look at that in more detail, and in this quote, which we'll bring up now, he really is claiming that the Conservative Party is going to be whiter than white. Transparency is at the heart of the government's programme, which is why the Cabinet Office, at the heart of government, is taking the lead. All departments will open up their data in the weeks ahead. We are pulling back the curtains to let light into the corridors of power. By being open and accountable, we can start to win back people's trust. Openness will not be comfortable for us in government, but it will enable the public to hold our feet to the fire. This way lies better government. Transparency is key to our efficiency drive and will enable the public to help us to deliver better value for money in public spending. Today is just the start of what we plan to do. We're determined to set an example for the wider public sector and to create a right to data as a core part of government business. Well, these are very fine words from Francis Maude, but if we even look at it against the background of Ken Clarke, we are just not actually seeing what the government is really doing. We'll give a mention to Nick Clegg in a few minutes, but the key point is that Francis Maude came in claiming that the government was going to be transparent. We were going to be told what they were doing, but when we actually start to ask simple questions about what's going on, Francis Maude doesn't want to say. And we can probably give a very good example of this by taking a look at what happened when the public put freedom of information requests directly into the Cabinet Office to ask about contracts that were being awarded. These were contracts to train the top 200 civil servants. And as a result of that simple question, one would have expected the government to have provided the information without any problems at all. But for some surprising reason, things became complicated. Now, the UK column brought this up in a number of articles. This was one of the front pages that we put up, asking questions about what the exact relationship was between Francis Maude and Julia Middleton, the chief executive of the political charity Common Purpose. So the UK column has worked quite hard to bring some of these issues out. And this is really a core document, which I think we'll spend a few minutes talking about. What we've got on screen is part of an article that we published in the UK column. But the underlying document, as viewers can see, is a Cabinet Office document. And this was supposedly the minutes of a senior leadership committee meeting that was held on the 9th of June 2010. I'll just read out some of the people present, as it's the print's a little bit small. Present were Gus O'Donnell, who was in the chair, Suma Chakrabarti, Ministry of Justice, Bill Jeffrey, Maude, Ministry of Defence, David Normington, the Home Office, Helen Ghosh from DEFRA, John Elveridge, Janet Paraskeva, the first Civil Service Commissioner, David Bell, a gentleman who's listed as from Pearson, but we'll come back to him in a minute, and Peter Elwood from Wrexham PLC. So this was the document that was released to the public, who would simply ask the question, what is going on with contracts being given by the Cabinet Office to the political charity Common Purpose. And this is what the Cabinet Office came back with in the first version of the minutes of that meeting. So item 7 was any other business, and I've commented there as first released to the public, and their comment was, running workshops for the top 200 under the Common Purpose model was proposed. Committee members agreed to consider the costs. Now, the expression top 200 refers to the top 200 civil servants, and what was going on in this meeting was a discussion to use Common Purpose to train and reframe the top 200 civil servants. However, when members of the public pushed for the actual minutes of the meeting, and that took quite some effort because contrary to Mr. Maude's statements about honesty, transparency, morality, etc., they fought like tigers to avoid releasing the correct minutes, and we can of course see why. Because in the correct minutes, it said that Helen Ghosh proposed running a number of workshops for the top 200 under the Common Purpose model. Helen Ghosh and David Bell agreed to consider the costs. Well, of course, the David Bell here is not only connected with Pearson, but it is David Bell, chair of the Common Purpose trustees. So within a cabinet leadership meeting, what was essentially going on, many people would say, is insider dealing, that a gentleman was busy sitting down to discuss the costs of a contract going to his very own organisation. Now, we can reinforce this story by saying that the UK column has also been informed recently of an individual who was loaned from the Cabinet Office to actually work with Common Purpose. So the public paying for that gentleman's salary while he was loaned out to the political charity Common Purpose. However, when Francis Maude's organisation has been asked to give more detail on this, again, there's been a total wall of silence. And there can only really be one explanation for this, and that is that we have some very, very dirty political dealings going on inside the Cabinet Office and indeed the civil service. We shouldn't forget this man, though. Nick Clegg, sitting in the background, a man who has never been elected to post, and at the moment, whatever he is doing in government is not being fully reported. And of course, one of the things that you picked up earlier, Mike, is his connections in with the Privy Council.
Well, he's president of the Privy Council.
Yeah.
As a deputy, I believe the Deputy Prime Minister's role automatically takes the presidency of the Privy Council. But Clegg has quite potentially sensationally failed in meeting his agenda requirements so far. So we'll see what happens in the second half of this.
Could you explain that a bit further?
Well, because he's been tasked to replace the British Constitution with a much more European style, human rights style constitution, and we've got to remember that human rights legislation all comes from the premise that you don't have any rights except for those which are expressed within the legislation. Whereas Britain's constitutional position is that you have unlimited God-given rights except for those which are absolutely prohibited by the law of the land.
Yeah.
So his role has been to bring in a new Bill of Rights, implying that we don't have a Bill of Rights, and to change the constitution of the House of Lords into something which is unconstitutional in this country, and complete the work of Tony Blair, in fact, and complete that agenda that Tony Blair began with the House of Lords reform in 1998.
Yeah, well, and of course Nick Clegg's whole background is intimately tied in with the European Union. He was effectively an intern of the European Union. So this is yet another man who's in Westminster at the moment, that if we dig into backgrounds, well, it would seem to me that these people are not... They're not British in any sense. They're anti-British.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this man up to? If there's anybody out there in the audience for UK Column Live today who's got information on Mr. Clegg and what his political role is at the moment, and indeed what he's doing inside the Privy Council, perhaps we should know. But Privy says it all because it operates but doesn't tell the public. So we're linking together some figures today as to the fact that really we've got a single party state forming itself. We see a mixture of people with Conservative and Labour and Lib Dem backgrounds that are simply moving forward for a common purpose. And of course, Sir Bob Kerslake, now head of the Civil Service and Common Purpose guru, is actually a key player in this. Because this is the man at the moment that is who is taking control of the civil service. And when we're talking about training the top 200 civil servants, we're not talking about training them in a normal conventional sense, as the average person would imagine. What we're talking about doing is reframing those individuals. So we're going to be using applied psychology with nudging and NLP, and of course Common Purpose's own brand of that, in order to ensure that key civil servants are doing exactly as they're told and exactly what the bidding is. Meanwhile, of course, this man has left behind a disaster in Sheffield as a city and a council, and we will just flag up again that Martin Brighton, who has been a fantastically brave gentleman blowing the whistle on the massive fraud and corruption that's occurred over the last 10 years in Sheffield. That very brave gentleman is now being put under extraordinary pressure with threats and bullying and intimidation by Sheffield City Council. But we'll report on that in more detail. Watch this man, watch Mr. Kerslake, because this is another key player in the dictatorship which is unfolding. We'd just like to give a quick mention to Mr. Jeff Mulgan, another man who sits in the background but is intimately connected with the highest levels of power, particularly where it concerns future leadership. And we'll just flag up in very simple terms the fact that Mr. Mulgan was co-founder of Demos in 1993 with a gentleman called Martin Jacques. And Martin Jacques, of course, was the former editor of Marxism Today. So it does seem to be an extraordinary coincidence that when we delve into the big society, we're looking straight into what is a baseline of Marxist ideology. And if we look at the team which is nestled around a supposedly Tory party, we're finding that the base is also founded on this Marxist experience and doctrine. I don't think that's an accident at all. And with that, we just call up the next slide. Okay, I just wanted to flag this up, which is the Conservative Party conference in 2010, and Cameron was talking about big society being a guiding philosophy. The big society is a guiding philosophy, a society where the leading force for progress is social responsibility, not state control. It includes a whole set of unifying approaches, breaking state monopolies, allowing charities, social enterprises and companies to provide public services, making government more accountable. Well, as we've said at the top of the slide, this really was a gigantic lie, because if we look further, we see that the Conservative home blog site admitted that the plan is directly based on the successful community organising movement established by Saul Alinsky in the United States, one which has successfully trained generations of community organisers, including President Obama. What Cameron failed to state there, of course, is that if we look into what the Saul Alinsky doctrine is, we come straight back on those overtones, undertones of Marxism. So what is being built in the country at the moment is absolutely not about removing government control through the localism bill, and watch Tory heavyweight Eric Pickles on this, is we are seeing government control being brought down to the lowest level. What's the effect going to be? Well, we're starting to see some of this if we move overseas. And you've got some comments about Spain here, Mike.
Well, this is kind of changing the subject slightly. Basically, this is an article that I saw today on the Zero Hedge website, asking if Spain is running out of cash, and in fact, essentially proving that Spain is more or less out of cash, absolutely highlighting the fact that Spain is in a, as we said the other day, a total downward spiral, heading down the plug hole very, very quickly. They're soon not going to be able to pay their debts. They are absolutely going to have to ask for a bailout. Unemployment is going through the roof. People are starving, and we've seen increasing civil unrest in the country. And what I really wanted to do here was just to contrast this, because Spain is focused on the whole austerity bailout principle to try and get itself out of this mess, which it absolutely isn't going to do. And I wanted to contrast that with Vladimir Putin. There he is. Now he held a couple of conferences over the weekend where he's basically saying that the Russian defense industry needs modernizing, and it needs to happen now. Now there's two points about this. First of all, why is he choosing the defense industry here? And I suspect that he's recognizing the global situation, particularly around the Middle East, and with the NATO missile defenses around the Russian borders, and the attempts to build similar missile defenses around the Chinese borders. I think Putin absolutely views what's going on in the Middle East as ultimately an attack on Russia, because once all these nations around the southwestern fringes of Russia have their regimes changed into Western compliant regimes, it's not going to be just Poland and Ukraine that's hosting missile defences, and I use the word defence as loosely, yes. Yeah. But what Putin is saying here is that he's going to use the rebuilding of the Russian defence industry as the mechanism to restart the Russian economy generally. And what he said was, our position is that by creating a modernised and effective defence industry, we can ensure a big growth potential for the entire national economy. The bulk of our advanced technology is in the defence industry, and civilian goods account for more than 30% of that sector's total output. There is a steady demand for these goods in the energy, metal, machine building, communications and other industries. This is not some discovery we have made in this country, but it is the way things work all around the world. The defence industry has always been an engine pulling the other manufacturing sectors along behind it. Of course, a stable and effective defence industry is also crucial for the prosperity and prospects in life for thousands of skilled workers, engineers and designers. The defence industry brings together 1,353 organisations, companies in 64 regions of the country and employs more than 2 million people. Just think how many that makes if you add their families and people working in related sectors and so on. And really what he is expressing here is the point that I and others have attempted to make regarding the fact that economies are real physical things. It's about production and productivity. It's not about money and currency flows. And when you attempt to bail out economies from a purely monetarist point of view, you fail. And when you use whatever the physical product is, in this case Putin wants to use the defence industry, and I've mentioned why I think he's choosing that, but other nations might choose large-scale infrastructure projects, government-sponsored perhaps, but you use them to drive the private sector and drive the real economy. Russia is going to suffer less from this economic crisis that the world is facing by the fact that their leadership is prepared to take this response rather than Spain and Greece and the rest of Europe, Britain included, which are determined to see their populations go to hell in a handbasket with bailout and austerity.
Well, of course, that bailout, the austerity is being designed into what our government is doing at the moment. I don't think there's any question that the aim is to reduce Britain to its knees in order to get the wider political agenda out there.
Yeah.
It is interesting that here we have Russia effectively declaring a major rearmaments programme at the same time that we've got David Cameron and William Hague whipping up violence in the Middle East and future conflict, while at the same time they're absolutely destroying British armed forces.
Yeah.
To me, it is almost like these people are beginning to emerge from the shadows. We've had 40, 50 years of this lie of politics in Britain of three parties, sometimes more, but three parties. We wait for the oppositions to actually sort out the problem, but what happens is once they're in power, a common agenda comes through, and that agenda, if you analyse it, certainly over the last 20, 30 years, is dismantling Britain as a nation state step by step.
Yeah.
And of course, as we flagged up was it yesterday or the end of last week, I've lost track, but we highlighted the fact that we're now seeing reports talking about closing down Westminster. So whatever Cameron and Clegg and Clarke and the rest of the cabal are up to, it certainly isn't in Britain's best interest.
Indeed.
So we'll thank you all for joining us. We hope that the transmission was good today. Thank you for being with the show. We'll be back tomorrow with more real news of what's happening in UK and overseas. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.